Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is December 13, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here today with Moira Smiley. What a pleasure. Wow, how cool. Where in the heck you calling in from, Moira?
Hi, Jerry. I'm calling in from Vermont and the western side of the state in a little tiny town called Bristol.
How cool is that? The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
Mm, love, having love, feeling like you belong.
I like that. That's the answer I get the most. So what's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
Music.
Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Mm, to feel meaning and connection with other creatures in the world.
I like that connection word. It's come up twice already. Do you think this need or want to collect information, gather information, is more innate or more invented?
Like, is it nature or nurture?
Yeah,
I have no idea. Yeah, I don't know.
yeah,
Whether it's cultural or genetic. Yeah, I don't know.
yeah. More a fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I
I don't know what I think until I have time to process the context and the source. Um, yeah, I think that's how
that's
I'd
good.
answer that.
Yeah, McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. And Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. But
Hmm.
I like the word process. It's come up a lot with people recently. Having the time to process the context. This is really important what we're talking about. Can humans think without language?
Well, they say that when you read aloud to yourself, right? That it's very hard to separate the act of reading in your own voice, hearing your own voice say something. That's how we read. I remember trying to do that experiment, 20 years ago, where somebody said, try to read something without hearing your own voice reading it to you. And it was really hard. But to answer your question, um, actually, say the question again, because I think there's a detail that I'm missing.
Can humans think without language?
Yes, I think they can.
Chomsky says a language is not just words, it's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work, when language breaks down?
Sing, move, gesture, um, smile, make faces. Uh,
Wait a minute, smile, make faces. That's
mhm.
good. You remind me of this guy a couple weeks ago. He says group hug.
Yeah, basically.
Boy,
Yeah.
you have a lot of good solution. This is a stupid question, and it's both, of course, and it depends. But just in general, your observations of humans, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
Feeling.
Yeah. These are two questions from Alan Turing, 1950s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
The soul. Well, yeah. That's a tough one because I mean, what is the soul really? But is thinking a function of the soul? I think all human um attempts to connect are soulful. I think that's how I'd answer that. Yeah.
It's good. His second question is, can machines think?
Um, yeah, I think they can.
Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Hmm. I think happiness is probably what drives the search for meaning. Well, happiness in that it goes back to connection.
Yeah.
Connection, connection, and connection. Yeah.
Yeah. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we creating it?
Hmm. If consciousness is sort of like the stories layered up like land gets layered up, like sedimentary rock gets layered up, it sort of feels like the will to live, the processes and the layers to sort of make living happen. um I would say it's already bubbling. Yeah.
Yeah. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Speed. Well, in my case, definitely speed of light.
Audre Audre Lorde, the poet, said you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools.
Mhm.
Yvonne Rainer responded to her and said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
New tool. If you expose the master's tools, those are old tools, right? But you're saying, like, if Audrey is suggesting that the old tools can't be used, what would the new tool be?
Yeah.
Um, New tool. I don't know if I'm your girl for that question. I mean, that answer, but I'd say, um,
How about a tool? Drop the word new. What tool do you suggest? What tool do you
mm,
what tool do you gravitate towards? And it doesn't even have to apply. Some of these questions I answer with cute quotes. You don't have to apply it to the quote if you don't want to.
uh, I think the tool that I keep returning to, but with more and more of a sense of the irony, the sort of the failure wrapped within its use, is
Yeah.
storytelling.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
great.
Even though I'm very not idealistic about storytelling, because they it can to tell a story is as scary as it is potentially wonderful.
Yeah. We're going to get into that. That's really cool. What new toy do you suggest?
A toy. Um, let's see. How about um it's not a new toy, but I think auto location, like echolocation. I think we should learn more. I think we should all learn to use that better.
Echolocation. That is cool.
It's more what a blind person would use, to understand where they are, what's happening around them.
You mean it's what bats use?
And bats use, yep. And a blind person will also use it,
Yeah.
to understand the world.
What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Um, how capitalism is hurting people and how some people think, um, they are innately better than others. That worries me.
Yeah, wow. McLuhan learned from the poet Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. So, by artist, I mean singers, painters, filmmakers, poets. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So we might be able to cope with what we don't like about the inventions.
Mm.
So just like you brought up capitalisms, humans invented capitalism. We have to, we don't have to, but we should cope with what we don't like about capitalism or
Mhm.
deal with it, you know. And so I asked you the question McLuhan struggled with his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Hmm. I don't know whether humans naturally, partly it's the resistance to change while being used to change happening without us having much to do with it, but we're if we find a pattern and we find the pattern and learn to deal with the pattern, then we're more into dealing with the pattern than dealing with the pain that it causes. You know, we're that we sort of we prefer that. We prefer to deal with the pain that it causes than to think of a new pattern. Yeah.
So it's you really got it because that's what a hidden psychic effect is. Usually people go, what do you mean a hidden psychic effect? We don't,
Yeah.
you know, to my personal opinion, you know, cars and it ruined the world. I mean, but you know,
Mhm.
my dad worked at GM and gave his kids a great education so I could learn that cars fucked up the world
Yeah, right.
by making cars.
Right. By making cars and making lots of
So
them.
so there's like the hidden psychic effect of cars is that it enhances private mobility. We're all alone and we're
Yeah.
not moving like a pack. But again,
Very. I remember you saying when I was walking with you or talking with you in Venice, and you said, "God, these new cars, the electric cars, there it's really hard as a biker to be around them because I can no longer hear the motors." You know?
you gotta put the Morwood sound. They know that.
Yeah.
They have to put the noise in, but it is a lot harder when you
Yeah.
go down the back alleys. But again, is that McLuhan's main thing is that everything we invent has services and disservices, and you're studying the patterns. Here's the pattern, here's a service, here's a disservice. I mean, there's a lot of services of cars, and there's a lot of disservices. Like, how do you navigate both of them to how it's shaping your behavior? So that's really what he was talking about. And you really got it there with the words you use. I appreciate that. Do artists have moral obligation?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say they do as much as any other human does.
Yeah.
But because they're broadcasting and there is a bigger potentially a bigger, um, effect from their actions and words, then yeah, I think it is somewhat of a moral obligation, but that moral obligation might be really upside down and backwards, like that it because that artist is sort of that artist might be living a life in order to show us, even with their unconscious as much as their conscious, what the disservice is doing to them. Like, and that artist might live their life trying to be honest about that, and that might not be the most moral looking life even.
Yeah.
So so I think so responsibility can look different.
Yeah.
And yeah. um mhm.
You're good with words. That was well put. And are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
I don't think either or.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just all about, I think more it's the, type of weight we put into ideas. And, if we put a sort of faith into some idea, it might be actually more powerful or more dangerous than if we hold, an idea lightly. So I think it doesn't matter whether it's old or new. It's the way that, it's presented. And I guess what is it? Marshall McLuhan said the medium is the message. In a way, it's sort of like, what is the, or did he say that? Is that Marshall McLuhan that said
It
something of
is.
that to that effect?
He did say that. Yeah, correct.
that basically how we're getting our ideas is and what we're getting them from and how we receive them, like what kind of context are we putting them in is really and I'm also a bit of a believer that where there are kind of no new ideas, it's just new contexts for ideas. I guess I'm a little bit of a Jungian. I like that Jungian idea that there is this collective sort of
Yeah.
way that we understand and pattern that just keeps on having slightly new reflective surfaces, I guess.
You're using all the words we do. We have a Carl Jung reading club, and this word context and environments is so important in patterns.
Mm.
Maura, can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Mm. Earliest. Let me think. Like, it's funny because my memory is pretty slippery, and I associate memories now with photographs that I've seen from that time. And I do remember a time when I was in a river. I grew up on a river in Vermont, and I remember the sound of the river being loud enough that I could not hear the adults when I was in the middle on a rock in the middle of that river. And I remember thinking, "Oh, this is kind of good."
That is so cool. That is great. Is
Yeah.
is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
I again feel like memory is a blessing, but I've had a fairly uh, blessed life, I feel. And so um, there's certain ways that my emotions interact with memory that I find somewhat cursing, like that disconnect me from other people, disconnect me from my feeling of um, being okay. So I
Yeah.
guess, yeah. Mhm.
Tell me someone within your immediate family and then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you, kinda like a role model, and what specifically was that impact?
My paternal grandmother, Marjorie, had an impact in that. Oh, sorry, I thought I turned that off. Oh, that's right, because I had to call you. 1 second. So my paternal grandmother was Marjorie Smiley, and she deeply influenced me by giving me regularly books about women. She herself was a lesbian, kind of in started, I think, to know that or act on that in the 40s, 1940s. And so I had a feeling about her view of the world that it was correcting something, and like she was handing me these histories of women and that kind of thing, and giving me a perspective that I noticed I wasn't getting elsewhere. So I think that was a big one. So that was within the family. Outside of the family, that's funny. The person that's coming to me right now today is a piano player by the name of Ron, who is clearly a kind of free spirit, real gentle, real able to show others what his thoughts were through music. And yeah, didn't was a man of few words, um, and had a gentleness that thought, oh yeah, I wanna be around that. Try to be that.
Beautiful. Were you raised a particular religion?
I wasn't. Mm-mm.
Do you pray?
Mm-mm.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Oh, after death. Good job, kid.
Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Oh, yeah, I've been grappling with the whole evil thing. I was always like, "Ah, there's no evil." Um, but then, you get to a certain age and you're like, "Oh, maybe there's evil. I don't know." Uh, I don't know. I still am of the belief that, yeah, every single brain is different. And so there are brains that are more willing to hurt other creatures and sort of have other priorities than making the world better and the
Yeah.
creatures around them feel better. So yeah, I don't know. Is that evil? I guess there is sort of an evilness because it's against this unspoken promise that we sort of make to each other to sustain each other or keep out of each other's way at least.
I love this word "ness" you used. In fact, this is really fun, Maura. I appreciate your time. Like, "ness" is such a cool word. You can add "ness" at the end of anything, and you get the essence more of it, because words, you want to nail down things. Like evilness, it means a lot
Mhm.
more than what we want to say. Evil. So really, the hidden question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set up with a few modern thinkers. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais: keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, Maura, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I see what he means because he's saying if you other if that enemy um falls outside of you, if you're sort of pushing that enemy outside of you, then you don't acknowledge their ultimate connection to you and that possibility of sort of, I guess, digesting that that evil, I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
And he had such a yeah, that kind of universalist way of thinking about our connection, our innate connection to each other. So I guess I would answer it that way, that I understand what he's saying. And then as far as an enemy, dealing with an enemy, I think that we are dealing with a version of something against us at all times. And I agree a little bit with the who was it that said that they need the enemy?
Fellini.
Fellini. Yeah. I mean, I relate to that idea that there is there that's a little bit of the hero trope, right? That we tell over and over and over, right? That whole thing of like, I need to have something even within myself to sort of push against. It's like having in singing we call it have, you need to have a sphincter somewhere to then open up. So you
That's
like
you're really you're really anticipating this question. I'm not going to ask you now, but it is
okay.
amazing what you're saying. It's like you'll love this one. Walt Whitman says, I no doubt deserve my enemies.
Yeah.
That's like, wait a minute.
Right.
But I'm
Yeah.
glad you brought up the word hero, because this is an amazing thing that you know, I read this Nassim Taleb quote. Games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, you don't know who really won or lost, but you can tell who is a hero and who is not. So when I read that to someone, they said, well, villains don't think they are bad. They
Mhm.
want control. Heroes want freedom. And,
Mm.
Bateson, the anthropologist, says when a criminal commits a crime, do they go, oh, I did something morally and socially wrong? Or do they go, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day. I got caught. You know,
Yeah.
so the basic question is does punishment work?
Yeah, it's a really tough one. Yeah, I was reading, I thought I was wanting to do a piece about that, Thomas More, Utopia, in which
Yeah,
there's a whole different penal system that is introduced in this island of, of utopian ideas.
yeah,
And it was interesting to read that because, yeah, I love the idea of restorative justice.
yeah,
Um, but it's like practicing socialism within communism. It's a little like, wow, yeah, I do. I believe in that. I believe in restorative justice, in that idea that everyone has the ability um, to find a way, I guess, to be in the flow with the other creatures around them. And I am not of the mind that we are innately bad.
yeah.
But I do believe we all have choices. Um, yeah, that we all have the ability to make we all have the ability to make mistakes, and we all have the ability um, to do things that hurt other people. And I guess what I do see is that the power structures often support the more criminal activity um, than they do the what do you call it? The more giving activity, the more selfless activity. Um, and so, yeah, it's confusing. It's confusing. I
It's
can,
like the prison industrial complex. It's like, yeah, prison's a big business.
it's a
And,
huge business.
Ram Dass really, this whole enemy question, I love what he says. He says, I'm having a real hard time loving George Bush. And it's like, fill in the blank. I'm having a real hard time loving Putin or loving
Yeah.
Trump or loving any of these. Like,
Yeah.
you
People in
know,
power.
that's,
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, is that you realize how much your culture has been guided and infused, and you allowed people like Trump, or like, that. And I was listening to the scion of a, a younger generation of a very big family, a very famous family. I won't name who they are, but just clearly that family got rich and famous and powerful and influential, and now very benefiting the area around them through basically just under criminal activity for a
yeah,
long time. you know so that's, and actually maybe just out and out criminal activity. So we just, yeah,
it's
there's
called,
no it's no secret that's
yeah,
what we value. We value
it's
that.
it's called creative accounting. You know,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
it's like my favorite is I'm obsessed with the mob and rock and roll. And they asked Nancy Sinatra, when did the mob enter the music business? And she said, honey, we created the music business. And it's
Ah,
like, yikes, we're
yikes.
in an icky business. But I mean, it's not icky. We love it. And that's how you're going to heal the world is music. But
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Hmm.
James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin about 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? So years later, Faulkner said sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Hmm. Yeah. Because we need ritual. Because theater is ritual, music is ritual, dance is ritual.
Yeah.
We do the weirdest things to have the in our interiors um feel meaning, I guess, is feel
Yeah.
meaning and feel connection and feel in control, actually in control. I think that's a big part of it, is that narratives and yeah, recreating stuff and telling stories gives us a sense of control that we don't otherwise have. And again, it's how we relate to that is the danger or the great benefit to ourselves and to others.
Yeah, it's a service or disservice. In fact, I love your choice of words, because Hollis Frampton, great experimental filmmaker, said, narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die.
Ooh, yeah.
Can you forget to die?
Yeah, I think can we forget? I mean, I feel like we mostly don't remember that we're dying. I mean, at least our consciousness, well, no, I should say our prefrontal cortex is sort of not even clocking that. But I think the part of us that does know that does the things that are not quote unquote smart. We'll bankrupt ourselves to throw a wedding. We'll dance until 2 a.m., even though we have to get up at 6, or we'll do some weird ritual and call it religion, and that stuff is what makes us defy death, I guess, or feel like we're close to it. I just saw a quote at Mass Mocha. It said, "Promise me peril. Promise me peril."
Yeah.
And yeah, I understand. Yeah, that's sort of how I feel like we try to forget death while in the face of it.
Walk us through, just briefly, Maura, please, how you chose music as your career, sort of like, what was the tipping point? You're growing up with, music around you, how recordings, and at what point did you go, that's what I want to do?
Mm, I think my internet is bad. Can you hear me again?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Hmm. I grew up in New England. There was this real sense of everybody doing music, and that was no big deal. But there's a lot of aspiration built into being able to do it well. Um, there are structures. In my case, it was like singing and playing an instrument well. Those were things that you could achieve that could kind of get you out of the emotional quagmire. In my case, of my parents, um, and my own self-doubt, that just it was clearly in my brain a way to fight for myself, and my voice was actually my protector from a pretty early age. Like, I felt it be my protector even when I was preteen. Like, my ability to yell and my ability to make sharp sound, that was a protective kind of quality, a ferocity. And so that was a big one. And then I learned that on the flip side of that, that the adults in my life and my peers, while confusing to me socially, often I found I didn't say the right thing, or I didn't have the right look or the right way to move in social settings. But in music, I had the right I had the
Mm.
right ways to do it. So it felt like, oh, that language is one that I do understand a bit better. And I don't know why, but it seems like I get a more sense of a belonging and connection, and like I'm helping. So I think it was that idea of connection. I'm helping, I'm ferocious, but I'm lovable. Those kinds of things started heading me in that direction of, yeah, maybe I could do this for work.
Wow. But are you, because I think also what I didn't hear from you is, are you learning music by performing it live, singing with other people, or are you listening on recorded music? I mean, where was the emphasis there? Are you listening
It was less of the recordings and more doing it live. Yeah, I'd
live?
say
Yeah,
I was less normal for my generation in that way.
yeah,
Yeah, the listening came in my 20s. The listening to recordings came in my 20s.
yeah,
And I certainly worshipped a few records, and I certainly worshipped my parents' record collection, and like a place where I could tell stories and gain control of a generally kind of unsafe feeling household was to go to those records, and like you go to books too, and be like, I'm going to put it in this order because this artist, you know, chronological order, or this artist sounds like this artist. And I started making categories and um, putting order to things that really helped my mood when I was around otherwise kind of a bunch of emotional soupiness.
wow, that is emotional stupidness. That sounds like a great song to write.
Yeah.
Um, that's like ness again. The word ness,
Yeah.
soupiness.
Yes. Yeah. It's an atmosphere.
So, a screenwriting teacher told me great art, great music, great film is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the
Hmm.
opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play when you're writing a song or composing a music piece?
It really depends because I write for other people. I
But
write a lot of.
when you're writing for Moira,
Oh.
when it's not an assignment or a
Hmm.
hired gig, yeah,
Yeah. And again, it's different every time. It's different every time. So sometimes there's an intent, an intellectual or conceptual intent. Sometimes there's a need to express a certain feeling, a certain emotional soupiness. Sometimes there's a curiosity about a certain way that a sound like evolves as I play with it. So there are a lot of different and I definitely fall in between those two camps of is
yeah,
my intention clear or is my intention not clear? I think, and it also depends on which art form I'm in, which genre of music that I'm finally landing in through
yeah,
these explorations. So yeah, I don't think I ever set out to be like, but this is how I want this I need people to know this particular thing. I usually have a hunch like, oh, I'm having resonance with this set of words or this sound. Oh yeah, I'm still feeling it. Oh, yep, check it again. It's like that echo chamber. You keep on
yeah,
trying it either by writing or by making sound, and you're like, hey, you send it out, and you're like, oh, I feel that still. I'm feeling things still, and then you keep following that. I'm
yeah,
feeling it still. I'm feeling it still. Um, and that's when yeah, and if you have enough follow through, then you find something that actually they maybe others will relate to, or a few others. Yeah. I've never really thought about it that much though. I've
yeah,
never, because I'm not a person that makes popular music. So um, I do think about some other people that I enjoy and admire and how they make me feel, how their music makes me feel. And I think I do imitate that. Yeah.
yeah. Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your listener when you're writing your song or composition? Not on assignment, a Mora song. How much are you
Mm.
thinking of your listener?
Oh, again, it really depends. Something like Refugee. Like I wrote a song called Refugee, Refugee. Um, I was actually just feeling in awe of my the people that I was writing about. I was feeling changed by experiences and connections and relationships that I'd had. And I was trying to I was I was feeling the sounds kind of just rupture from me. So I think in that case, um, yeah, that's one way that it comes through. And then in other ways, I'm really like I have a dream or something, a dream a very vivid dream happens, and I'm trying to remember it and recall it and feel through the thread that I think my brain was trying to make, or my subconscious was trying to make to my consciousness. So I try to write words that create that line to a sense of maybe a change in feeling. It's usually about change in feeling. That's what I'm
Mhm.
wanting. That's what I'm wanting.
Mhm.
It's a transformation. It's a sense of movement.
Change in feeling, transformation. Those are great words. Um, what's the function of music?
Hmm. I think it's feeling. Yeah. And
Yeah.
there can be some cognitive stuff that goes along with that, but I think it's really the feeling stuff, like change in emotion again, like transformation. Yeah, hopefully. Or yeah, transformation that can happen because the body has a physical response to it.
So I just recalled this one. Blue Jean Tyranny, amazing keyboardist that I interviewed with all these questions once, said, music is a means of deeply informing myself that there's another world. Music is my way of being in the world.
Hmm. Yeah, for me, that's true too. Yeah. Yeah, just to sort of, it's a way of saying, yeah, am I here?
Yeah.
Am I here? And do I compute with you? That's kind of like it is another like a checking in. It's like, am I um yeah, it keeps on going back to this echolocation idea. That seems to be my theme today. The
What
echolocation. Like send it out.
echolocation? Yeah.
Echolocation. Yeah. Send it out and feel what the room feels like around you by making the
Yeah.
sound.
What's the origin of those two words? Did you make them up, or is there
No.
you learned it from someone?
Yeah, I think it's a term, yeah, used for bats, the way bats
Yeah,
get around
it
and
goes way back. Yeah. Because then back to McLuhan, he said, we do art to show what our world is made of.
yeah.
And I'm just curious, what is the world made of? So if he's saying we do art to show what our world is made of, what is the world made of? I'm trying to come up with a follow-up question, but I don't know if that one worked. You're the first one I've tried this out on.
Yeah.
I always try out new questions, and then they help me if the wording's any good. I
Yeah.
gotta tell you, this woman I interviewed, I go, is it more this or more that? You know, because I don't want them to say, is it this or that? I use the
Yeah.
word more. So it doesn't matter. I know it's both and it depends, but it's a jumping off point. But she came back to me and said, the word more doesn't function in your question.
Oh, more this or more that. Is it
Yeah,
this or
because
that?
I what it is more like me and you more versus the questions and how they're worded. You know,
Mhm.
it's not like I have some special formula. I'm always trying to juggle how I word them, and I'm open for people to use different verbs than I use, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
But how would you say if art is to show what our world is made of, what is the world made of?
Electricity. That's it's like for me it's pulse. Pulse is the
Oh,
big
that's good.
it's like the
Pulse.
constant pulse, 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 you
Pulse
know?
is a great word. But it's funny you said electricity first because that is such the hidden ground. I mean, we're doing something we couldn't do, in my opinion, in a room live with each other. That
Mm.
we are so focused in a technology that is basically live TV. So we
Mhm.
could be in New York in the 50s and there'd be a big studio with lights and cameras, all dependent on electricity. And they could
Yeah.
be broadcasting it across the country, you know. But I've freaked out since COVID caused Zoom to take over my world, because all my live events are better on Zoom than they were live. And people don't want to hear that. They want to go, oh, when are you going to go back to meeting in a room?
Yeah.
And I'm not going back to meeting in a room. You got to set up chairs. You got to park. You got to
Yeah.
do all this other stupid stuff. But my attendees, everybody is so more present.
I understand that.
We're more
Well,
present.
because you're talking and it's mostly your brain that you're using. But I would say that there's other, like, the whole reason that I'm grappling with this Narcissus story and trying to tell the story of Narcissus, you know, with the phone as the new pool, the gazing pool, you know, the phone, and this is, you know, very old wine in new bottles. I mean, I'm using a Greek myth after all to sort of make sense of why I want embodied experiences. And I
Yeah.
do feel like music is part of that. So I
Oh,
think for talking, what you're talking about is, yeah, this is an amazing medium. But for
yeah.
music and my body, it is better to have experiences that are with other people. And actually not always focused.
Right.
So
You're in a normal, that's the normal state. If you're in a room and you're looking this way and that way, but when you're in a Zoom and I look down to take notes, people think I'm not paying attention.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it is, all we're doing is we're headless. I mean, we're bodiless. It's just our face. And, you know, I watched Swan's live stream for a couple minutes this past year when I wasn't there. And I was like weeping and going, I've got to go back. And I'm like, I don't want to go back there anymore. I don't want to do Lime. I don't want to fly, you know,
yeah,
and Susie's gone back. But it was like, nope, I think I better go back one more time, you know.
yeah.
Because, you know, I agree with that. But I have to tell you about Narcissus, as Narcosis is one of McLuhan's most important essays. What you're talking about is, you really touched on it, is that he reinterpreted that myth, that story, by saying the guy didn't fall in love with the reflection of himself. He fell in love with the tool, which was, we invented mirrors as biomimicry. We invented a mirror because we saw our reflection in the water. So we invented mirrors. So it's the reflective tool is what Narcissus is obsessed with. He's not obsessed with himself. He's obsessed with his tool, and he doesn't realize what his tool's doing to it. And it's numbing him, because narcissism is etymologically rooted in the word narcotic, meaning numbing.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting. I didn't know that those shared the same root.
it's just, it's poetic, you know, ness, but it is like, this is how our tools, the irony is that our tools, McLuhan says technology is the most human thing. You know, the banjo is a natural extension of the, you know, whatever, you know, in that regard, if everything we invent extends some humanness, then all we're doing is extending our bodies, you know. Because I was going to ask you, I know a tool you use is the banjo. So if McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness, or he said human sensorium, the knife and fork extend our teeth, clothing extends our skin. Consciousness could be like religion or philosophy could be an extension of consciousness. It doesn't have to be tangible. What does the banjo extend for you? What humanness?
Yeah, I think it's that sense of, for me, it's a sense of circularity, whereas the piano is a very linear thing for me, and the banjo is an instrument of circles for me. Cycles, circles, round in sort of interpolations, and spirals. So I think for me, that quality of banjo is an important it's not conceptual, it's actually quite felt. It's kind of a
Yeah.
physical feeling. It's an oral feeling. And then the other extension of it is an earthiness, I guess is what you would
Yeah.
call it.
Yeah.
And that sense of belonging to something that hasn't been ultra refined, even though you could argue that actually, but and it definitely is a very culturally heavy instrument now. I mean, we know more and more how much that instrument is a representation of many dark uh, perspectives on
Yeah.
who gets to be human and who doesn't get to be
Yeah.
called human. And so I feel that technology is often on that bleeding edge of how are we defining who is valuable. And
Yeah.
um, so I guess that is, I like that you talk about the mirror in Narcissus, for instance, but I also think that is there an autoerotic quality to,
Oh,
yeah, looking at one's reflection, like
yeah,
yeah,
he
it can
wasn't
be
saying
in so many ways.
he wasn't saying his interpretation was better or refined. He's saying there's another interpretation of it.
Yeah.
That's all. He was just saying it's just like his main thing is we shape our tools, then they shape us.
Yeah.
And so, you really got it with the banjo because the evident one and the basic one, people is what does the banjo extend is they would say your voice. But you
Hmm.
said no, earthiness, circles. So this is amazing because Copeland said the four ingredients of music are melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. In layperson's terms, how would you describe just briefly what is tone color?
Tone color is the individual or culturally agreed upon um, set of high and low frequencies that says this is what this is and this is what this comes from.
That's good. You should hear what I they always go timbre. I goes, no, that's a highbrow musical term. You really put it in basic terms. I appreciate that. Now you take those four, and I know it's a stupid question, but how do you navigate when you're composing or what do you gravitate towards? Melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. Because I know there's a lot. You're incorporating all four all the time. But
Mhm.
do you favor one of those four, or do you write a
Mm.
song with one in mind, or just how do you navigate those four?
It's all by feeling, and I think you just, yeah, I think it's not there are the thing that I've gotten conceptual and therefore stuck on is actually tone, because I actually work on that a lot, and I go to universities all around the world and talk about how a singer should not be confined to thinking that there's one way to sing that's correct. There's a way to sing that's anatomically comfortable and easeful, but there's not one way that's correct or better than another way, actually.
Yeah.
And so that whole idea is BS, and it needs to be taken out of yes, yeah, it needs to be taken out of the academy, really, in my opinion. And so I go around talking about tone and timbre a lot, and I demonstrate how wildly various our own voices are. I could
Yeah.
talk to you like this and say, Jerry, don't you think that? Do you agree with me about this? Or I could talk like this, Jerry.
Yeah.
Don't you think you agree with me like that?
Yeah.
Just even that, or the way I shape my I instead of I,
Yeah.
I.
Yeah.
So the singer is like really right up against tone and timbre in a very facial sort
Yeah.
of frontal way. And so I feel like tone and timbre is a big uh, part of um, Well, it's going to be really interesting also to see how this gets extended in our AI world, which we are headed for.
Well,
We're in that direction, and so it'll be interesting to see how that gets recorded, because we're deep now into the world of recorded everything, right? And the recreation of everything, and so yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how things are made. I mean, I sometimes wake up and go like, oh yeah, I feel like within my lifetime there may be no more artists because machines will do that for us. I mean, there'll be people with
no
creative
way.
ideas.
You could make an album with an auto-tune machine that would be kick-ass. I already know that. And you would transform the tool. Tools are just there, and it's how, it's like the guy who put out the bumper sticker, drum machines have no soul. And I said to him, dude, that's like saying chairs have no soul. You meant to say the way my aesthetic is, that some people misuse drum machines. He goes, that's too long for a bumper sticker.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
one thing to go back to is, yeah, we can do that, but Diamanda Galas can only sing for 15 minutes or she will lose her voice,
Oh,
So
really?
there are people who can do something with their voice, but they have to know how long. It's
Yeah.
so intense of screaming. But
Uh-huh.
my friend has the 3 T's of music: technique, theory, and taste. So, you've learned the technique, the theory. How does one acquire taste?
I don't know. I think taste is probably more important to some human beings than others. Um, I myself, taste is about, again, I think just how important it is for you to feel connected to others.
Yeah.
Um, and how important social status is to you, or like what you want to, yeah, what you feel is a place of freedom and control. It's all that, like how much you want of which thing. And I think taste um is I think taste is highly subjective. I think it's also about power. I think taste is so much about power.
Really well put. Maura, it's such a pleasure. McLuhan says this line. I'm dying to hear your thoughts on it. Song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference. Any comment? And I can say it again if
So
you
he's
want.
saying it's slowed down speech, but that it's related to the language. That wait, is
He's
it?
saying song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference.
Hmm. Interesting. I heard some cockamamie idea that I mean, I do believe that we're connected to our geography and the way that we choose to make sound, and I certainly see there's yeah. Is there a unifying theory? Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with that, because I think we have um within us, we they say, I can't remember whose theory this is, but the theory of language is that a baby is born with the ability to make any sound, and
Yeah.
then just through acculturation, we learn to bring forward by mirroring what's around us
Yeah.
in an audio way, um, certain ones, and then we lose the ability to do certain things. Like they use the example of a Japanese baby will not be able to say their R's after a while, or that'll be harder for them because that's not an emphasized sound, right? And we don't do in the States, we don't do clicks in our language, right? So there's things that we basically unlearn and become much harder. We'd have to practice a lot to get that kind of back into the body. So I guess I feel like there's a lot of physical evidence for that aspect of things. But as it relates to taste, I mean, yeah, I guess it is a lot about language, but I think it's about other things too. I think it's about,
Yeah.
yeah, how I think somebody was saying the pace of life does affect how songs are made, or how, where we put song in our lives. And I have to add one more note to this: is a lot of what I teach about singing is that you must think about context, and that the context for singing has historically been quite large. It's not just about being in front of a microphone and entertaining um, with a amplifying device just in front of you. Like, singing was involved in so many different acts of being human, and it still is. But in some cultures, the sort of the bandwidth for the use of singing is much narrower now than it was before. So I think, yeah, so our taste as to what a singer is supposed to be, or what a musician is supposed to do, is very related to our use of technology.
Beautiful, Maura. Thanks for being so dang articulate and really evoked the tuba throat singers. When I heard them live, it was like transformational. It was just like, wow. And then I heard all they sing about is three things: their boots, the snow, and their horses.
Yeah,
It is like,
yeah,
man, my mind went way beyond that, even
right.
that. But
Yeah.
you also said this thing about song that I heard on the radio, this famous writer, and she said, I was raised in the Caribbeans and my mother never read a book,
Mm.
but she knew what to do when a tsunami hit from a song that she sang.
Ooh, yeah. I relate to that wicked strongly. Yeah.
That is amazing. That brings tears to my eyes. Like, that's what I mean, music did to us in the 60s. It changed our lives. And
Yeah.
we didn't read anymore. We
Mhm.
listened to songs. The
Yeah.
song lyrics was our literature, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I was just singing, I was walking in a field with my mother today, and she sings this really early American hymnody called shape note singing. And it's this wild poetry that's very Calvinist, very it's admiring of nature, but also basically looking straight through a very dark life existence to a heavenly existence in front of you. That's basically, you're pointed there, and yeah, this is shit. What's going on right now? This is shitty, and you're probably shitty too. As a creature, you're pretty bad stuff. And so we're headed towards that heaven thing, and there's this entity that's going to help you,
Wow.
which is right. And so I grew up around all this text because we sang it as folk musicians sing. And my mother and I know that a lot of these texts, but they're not part of my cosmology in any sense at
Yeah.
all. But I know that they're in there.
Yeah.
They were the first texts that I ever knew and memorized without even thinking, with how you do it as a kid.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
and
like mantra. It's sort of like a mantra. It's like
yeah,
something you repeat, you know.
yeah,
It has that safety to it.
yeah.
What's more fundamental, music or language?
Hmm. I mean, they're really different parts of the brain. So I don't know if I would say one or the other is more fundamental. I just think they're quite separate, in fact, in their evolutionary use. Um, and that they've come together to do powerful things.
Thelonious Monk said there's no wrong notes. Any comment?
I agree.
Miles Davis talked about the space between notes. How do you navigate silence? I mean, this is dynamic, something,
Mm.
you know, growing up with the music we grew up with, there's so much like not silence, it's like
Yeah,
it's so like George Clinton says, funk is the absence of.
of silence.
Yeah, it's like yeah, it's like why is there such a bombardment? They don't know silence is so important. But how do you navigate that? You're a composer, you're a singer. How do you navigate when to have silence?
I think silence is cultural. It's you learn to navigate, you learn to deliver the silence that feels good to you and will be accepted by others. If you want to be in a state of communication, you have to stand the right distance away from that person. If you stand a little too close, well, they might enjoy it for a little while, and I feel the same about silences. Um, I actually think that I need to learn to be more silent, to be more at ease. I just read a quote that the most powerful person in the room is the most calm, and
Yeah,
the calmest person is the most powerful. And
yeah.
I took that to heart a little bit because, yeah, I think I relate to that. Yeah. So I
That's
think silence is golden.
yeah. That's two more Thelonious Monks. Monk said, "Silence is the loudest sound in the universe."
Yeah,
And
I was just in a James Turrell uh, room with
wow,
no light.
yeah,
I don't know if you've gone to see that one, but
I know all about him. Yep,
yeah, you take you in. I hadn't actually been to this one because I went to the one in LACMA, the exhibition. I guess
yeah,
it was nearly 10 years ago now, and then so this one was at Mass MoCA, and this I'd never been in this particular room. You follow a railing in just by feel to this place of complete darkness, and you sit there for 15 minutes.
wow,
And you cannot see a thing. It's
yeah,
quite amazing. And then the next room you enter is to go into that room where the colors change very, very softly and gradually. Um, and so to me, that blackness was like silence. It can be
amazing.
deafening, deafening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing about Monk is my friend said, Thelonious Monk heard all the notes Charlie Parker heard, but only decided to play some of them.
Yeah. I
So,
could see that.
yeah, in this line of jazz, Ben Ratliff says, I mean sound as it has long functioned among jazz players as a mystical term of art, as in every musician finally needs a sound, a full and sensible embodiment of their artistic personality, such that it can be heard at best in a single note. So, no, having heard your music for so many years, I could hear Moira at one note and go, "That's Moira," or
Yeah.
people go, "That's Miles, that's Jimmy," "That's Ella,"
Yeah.
one note. And so Ben says Miles is fragile and pointed. Coltrane is slightly undercooked and urgent.
Mm.
If um, a music writer was summarizing your sound, the Mora sound, in 2 words, what would you feel most honored and they got it?
Oh, that's interesting. Because I was gonna say I'm a little bit like undercooked and urgent myself.
That's good.
I am. I think that's really good. And I talk about it as I'll get to it 2 words. I'm gonna get around to the 2 words, but I've saw like I recorded a Hildegard a record of the 12th century abbess Hildegard and her music, and which is basically like medieval chant. And I was singing with another singer in a duo, and her voice had this. Her pacing was so slow, so much more languid, and so every note had its particular spin. It was amazing to sing next to her. My voice has so much direction and sort of energy and anxiety in it.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I'm learning a ton by being this with this singer. Um, and so But then you come back to yourself and you're like, oh, well, I guess this is kind of what I do, what I
Yeah.
am. And so I'd say the two words that I would love is that um, I would say when I sing, I would like a critic to say I'm fully inside. I don't know, that might be too insular, but it's something like that. Something like
Yeah.
fully, maybe um fiercely embodied
Yeah.
or um or yeah, I don't know. I think
No,
those
those
are
are all firstly embodied is all good because it leads perfectly into look at I go along with slightly undercooked and urgent because you are like the Coltrane of vocalist.
not exactly, but I relate
But
to that idea.
the
Yeah.
but I mean, I love Supreme. It's totally true. That T.S.
Yeah.
Eliot said, you touched on this so much in our time together here, Maura, is T.S. Eliot said, poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
What language? Like actual, like one of the
No,
prettier languages?
more metaphorically. It's like what form is your inner consciousness in? But it's sort of like you've been talking about this in inner. And you're talking about inner feelings, but it's also McLuhan actually has a book called Interior Landscapes, meaning
Mhm.
there's the inner person and the outer person. But that's what T.S. Eliot's saying is that's what poetry is outing your inner dialogue, the voice inside you.
Yeah.
What language is that voice in?
Hmm. Trying to think like how to describe that language. And I would say it's tremulous and horizontal.
That is good. Let's go with those for now. That's amazing because you'll love this great filmmaker in New York. I says, "What language is your inner dialogue in?" She goes, "I wish I knew."
Yeah.
I love that answer because
Yeah.
it's Rebecca Solnit is so good at saying, just because you're asked a question doesn't mean you have to answer it.
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, one forgets. One forgets. We're so dutiful. Such duty creatures.
You've been singing for many years. Tell me one major element of your
Hmm.
musicness, your creativity has stayed the same and one major element that's changed.
Hmm. One that stayed the same is a deep physical bliss at harmony.
Yeah.
And one that's changed is honestly, right now, this is a vulnerable thing. I have less surety about which combination of high and low frequencies is my truest. So I'm less sure about um home as far as tone.
Oh, less sure about home, HOME,
Mhm.
the home of the
A
tone.
home tone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Partly that's because there's a loss of idealism, which is good. There's an awakening that's been more embodied, less intellectual. And so, yeah, that feeling of change and mutability, I think, matches the actual change that happens in our bodies. And um, sometimes I think we haven't caught up to the change that's happening both within and without. And so the voice seems like a very direct line to you trying to find the home tone. What's the home tone? And again, I go back to like, it's many, many things, but like when you're singing, and I guess, you know what that's about? It's actually like, who am I talking to? Who am I talking to?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about it a bit more. Like, I think I have been content to preach to a choir in many ways. To preach to a choir that is already on my team, you would
Yeah.
say. Like that doesn't really bothered me. Um, but am I soother? Am I going to just soothe? Um, I don't feel soothed inside, and yet that's a beautiful and lovely role. You can make a good living that way. Um, but then there's also all the undiscovered territory of dissonance and being disagreeable um, that I'm interested in. I'm more
Yeah.
interested in.
Really well put. You know, Frank Zappa brought up Pauline Oliveros
Mm-hmm.
in 1969 in the LA Free Press. And they asked him about her work with sound above the audible and below creating a mass. And Frank said, not that it created a mass, it created something audible. It created a sum and difference tone, which happened to be located within the audible frequency range. So by combining something so high you couldn't hear it and something so low you couldn't hear it, it yields something in the middle that you could hear. Whether or not you liked what you heard is another question. The concept is brilliant. So that was Frank talking about Pauline Oliveras's thing about so high and so low,
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
it creates something in the middle.
Yeah. I dig that. I think I can picture actually what Frank Zappa might have been hearing in the actual sounds that she made. I mean, she would play that high note on the accordion sometimes and or generate it with the electronics, and you would feel like the way that you feel often, yeah, being radical, I guess you could also think of it that in that way, like being out on the edge can make you realize what the middle is. And also, I think about it as far as being an a cappella singer and a woman and having a certain range that I can sing. It's here. It's like, actually, it's like it's like here. And then there's like way up here and way down here. And I was content for so many years to be in this whole range and to have my music making in that range. And then I would hear the other musicians talk about, oh yeah, I could hear that's a cool sound that you're making right there, but there's like all this stuff down here. And you should probably put your stuff with that stuff. And I was always like, nah, this is enough. I don't need that. But it was sort of it was a willful ignorance in a way, you know.
Yeah.
But I didn't need any more. And I think that's actually can be really a guide to other people sometimes
Yeah.
when you say, hey, this thing that sounds really minimalist and seems like such a tiny slice of the whole thing actually gives me a sense of the whole thing. You know, like I finally hear and sense like more. And I feel that about minimalism too, the music of minimalism, that there is a sense of being able to, I guess, stay with your thoughts a little longer when you're listening to something that's slowly evolving and doesn't sort of bombard you with new ideas all the time.
Yeah.
which is a little bit the same as what Frank was talking about with the
Yeah.
high and the low. That's sort of like, this is pulse, 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 pulse. Oh, you can kind of like check in on it intermittently and have a thought that blooms. I find it that way.
Yeah.
My thoughts bloom when I'm around minimalist things.
It's good. I love it too because I was always like, who's better, Steve Reich or Philip Glass? And you're supposed to say Steve Reich, and then my friend goes, no, Philip Glass is better. And then my friend read Philip Glass's book and says, he learned everything he knows from going to the Garrick Theater shows of Frank Zappa. And I was like, okay, now I like Philip Glass.
Of course.
And then John Adams would go visit Frank, and Frank sort of smart-assingly dissed minimalism music and called it looparama music.
Yeah.
But it's all good. He heard Mordenfeld. He heard it all when it was in its early stages, pre Terry Riley. But this is Moshe Feldenkrais. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Oh, first of all, I love Feldenkrais, and I've benefited greatly from practicing it.
Yeah.
Oh my God, my whole life is that. It really is. Like I have so many blind spots, so many weaknesses.
But tell me like one blind spot or weakness that you actually turned into a strength.
Yeah, it's funny to take responsibility for something like that. Like to know, oh, well, that's what I actually did. I mean, I think you do it even like what I had a very bright little voice, not a little voice, but a kind of bright voice. And I found the music that fits it, that like,
Yeah,
so that's one
a
thing.
good one. That is a good one.
Yeah. And so that wasn't terribly conscious, but it was,
Yeah.
because I had the good fortune of starting early while I was still
Yeah.
basically unconscious. Another thing is sickness. Yeah. I was very a very sensitive little kid, and I was scared shitless of my parental sort of situation. And I became a really fierce, willful kid in order to get beyond that. And I think that that's been a big part of my, my way of navigating. It also made me sick. So I also got Crohn's because I believe I separated a lot. Like when my body was really still scared, my mind was like going, nope, you're going to do it anyway. We're going to go and do that thing. Whereas, so I was basically running on adrenaline all the time. So I don't know. I don't think that's a strength, but it was something that it was a sensitivity that I overrode as a kid, learned to override as a kid. And then that became part of the reason I felt strong enough to sing, for instance, or lead people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like McLuhan also calls it, how do you turn a breakdown into a breakthrough, or a rejection into a redirection? So again, it's not, the words are, heavy. When I say, tell me a weakness you turn into a strength, and people are like, you want me to tell you one of my weaknesses? So it takes a lot of courage. But this is the question you anticipated so early on, and I had to wait, but I still want you to comment on it if you could. Is two of my film heroes have the mantra, ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says, there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. So I know it's a stupid question. I know it's both, and it depends on the context. Is art making, is music making more self-expression, or more you're a vehicle for whatever technology, cultures, and environments are dominant?
Oh, I'm really glad you're asking this question because I'm going to do my own podcast, I think, is coming up because the world needs more. And I'm going to ask, I'm talking to singer heroes for me who use their voice fully or wildly, was kind of a stupid word too, but more wildly push the boundaries with their voice in their profession. And I'm going to ask a similar question to that. Is it self-expression, or are you aware of it being a cultural expression? And are
Yeah,
you
it's not even,
aware?
it's not so much even aware. Are you a vehicle? But being aware is part of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. I actually think it's so interesting because I am coming from such a communal music background, and yet it's my ignorance that allowed me to step out. So I think it's both things, because
yeah,
I have a deep respect and wish to stay in the groove with people and to stay useful. But then there's this other part of me that's emotional, dealing with the soupiness, dealing with all the wish, the ego, the wish to stand out, the wish to be special. Um, I think that what feels most comfortable for me to say is that I, as an artist, operate more in the channeling part of
yeah.
things than the self expression. That is more comfortable for me because of my mix of influences and my way of making the living.
It's really good. And you see how I want to be flexible on the verbs. You turned vehicle into channeling. So it's really a great word, channeling. But I
Mm.
want to give you the 3 examples I sometimes bring up is they asked James Brown's drummer, "Where'd you get your sound?" He lived in Ohio. One side of his house was a train track and the other side was a factory. So he was the architect for funk drumming because it was like boom, tsk, tsk, boom, tsk,
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
they asked Ginger Baker, "Where'd you get your drum sound from?" He says, "I was in London when they were bombing us." Boom, 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 boom.
Oh,
But,
wow.
but here was my favorite. The guy from Negative Land, he said, Missy Elliott said she learned how to sing from car alarms.
Wow. That's
That
incredible.
that to me is because I learned how to sing in the church. It's like, no, I learned how to sing from car alarms.
Wow. Yeah. That makes so much sense. Oh my
But here's
God.
here's the real hidden question there is, can art making, music making be egoless?
You know, that's so funny. I just did a gig with a bunch of famous people, right? So Brad Mehldau, we
Yeah.
got off the stage and he came over to me. He's like, "Wow, thank you. Your singing is so egoless."
Oh my God. That answers that right there. I'd put that in your press kit and
I
on your
know, seriously. But I think what he was seeing is that I was in service to my friend Meryl Garbus
yeah,
and to Chris Thiele, who I was singing with,
yeah,
and I was in service to this Gene Ritchie song. I was
yeah,
in service 100%.
yeah,
And that is a beautiful thing. It's
yeah.
a beautiful thing. And that's I teach that a lot too. I was like, see if you can find that service thing without it being some sort of pious religious idea. But really, I think we are attracted to that way of someone expressing. And I think it's sometimes, when you're in the mode, that's why I love music that's with ritual,
Yeah,
because you're not in your self-consciousness.
yeah,
You're in a sense of channeling or whatever. So
yeah.
it's unself-conscious.
Well, check this out. That question, can art making be egoless? 90%, 80 to 90% say no. Then about a year ago, a woman said, great art is egoless. And then a couple months ago, a woman said, great art has to be egoless. So it's really, and most people will continue. 80% of people say no because it's a complicated word. Because ego less, it brings in too much of how Freud is
Yeah. Freud is the
you know,
yeah.
in my when I get into it with people on this question, I go, was Freud right? You know, that's the follow-up question if I really want to be a smart ass, you know, if they're
Yeah.
saying, you know, because we just go, oh, Freud was right, you know. I mean, do we,
Yeah.
you know, not cut he like about what? Well, you know, I'm just asking a big general question. Was Freud right? And we're all like, yes, he was right to a point because he's so ingrained in our it's like what Harold Bloom says about God. He says, do you believe in God? I says, no, I don't believe in God, but he's in our language and he won't go away. So I
Yeah.
have to
But
deal
I
with.
think, yes, I think we are dealing with Freud as
Yeah,
in that similar way. And
yeah,
I'd say a lot of women would disagree that Freud was right. You know,
exactly.
and
Yeah.
so yeah, I think that yeah, we have cause to reframe. We have cause to use
Cause
to
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 reframe.
reframe. Use Freud a little bit like we use that sphincter, you know, just push against it a little bit.
You know, George Lakoff is great neuroscientist linguist, and he said, in order to, you know, have change, you have to use the existing tools and invent new tools. You got to
Mhm.
use both. You can't just invent new tools, and you can't just rely on the old ones. When in your word
Yeah.
reframing, that's what he's all about.
Yeah.
Now, Moira, I asked for 90 minutes, and it's 90 minutes. Can you go another 10, or you got to go now?
I can go another, yeah, let's say 7 more minutes. That's gonna be our perfect number.
Seven's perfect. How do you find peace of mind?
Meditation is really good for that. Gratitude, you know, thinking of what I love and what I'm grateful for. Um, yeah, like just having a little saying like, "Oh yeah, this is good right now." Whatever it is. This is or not even good. No, it's not a value judgment. Like breathing into it. This is
Breathing. There's a line that goes, you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait morphed it into you are what you hate. James Joyce said,
mm,
it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated in the religion in which you say you disbelieve. And Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. Any reflection just briefly on this line, you create what you resist. Not you more, but one creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that line?
yeah. Um I don't know. There's so many ways to look at that. But I mean, yeah, so in many cases, yes, I feel like that is the truth. But I think there's also a feeling like um we get along better if we think of merging. We do. We do kind of get we get more we understand how time is in relation to change more if we think about ourselves as including all the things we want to change. I guess that's what it is for me. Like if I think, and that's why pulse, I come back to pulse, you know, and that's
Yeah.
why things are also constantly changing. It's just that this sort of greater relationship between the pulses is going to be something different than I expect, and that gives me a sense of peace, and it gives me I guess that's what it is. It's like it's our own sense of suffering that quote is talking about, right? It's talking about if we create what we resist, we're othering something, and we're not thinking about the ability to digest. And I don't know, is that control or change?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So I
good.
like
These
merging.
are beautiful, well put. These are 5 quick Alan Watts questions, just off the top of your head in a few words. Who started it all?
Who?
Yeah.
I don't think anybody did.
Are we going to make it?
Make what?
Where do we put it?
Out there.
Who's cleaning it up?
No one.
Is it serious?
Or women.
Yeah. Hello.
Is it
The last
serious?
one, is it serious?
Yeah, and also hilarious
Oh, that's
simultaneously.
good. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Yeah. Let's sing.
Nice. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Oh, something good that I never had and I never want. I don't know. Something good that I never had and I never want. Maybe fame and a lot of money.
Dude, listen to this. The answer I get the most is fame, money, and heroin.
And heroin. Wow. Right.
So
Yeah.
you got 2 of them. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
You can tell I'm not real down on everything right now. I mean, I am down on things. I think yeah, I do feel that there is it's so hard to say, like, to apply something like this to all humanity, because that's basically what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to say this is happening around this planet of ours. That's what we're talking about? Or maybe
You
even further
you
out?
you can put it into any context you want, but that's generous.
It's all about context. Um maybe some folks find it in vogue to think about context. I'm into that.
That is good, environmental. Okay, so 2 more and we're out of here. Thornton Wilder said, "Art is confession. Art is the secret told, but art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time." You've laid your cards on the table for 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
The feeling of release in my body that connection brings and that trust brings and that surprise can bring, that feeling of release.
Release. That's beautiful. Last question. What gives you the most optimism?
Constant change.
Yeah. It's one of my lines I invented when I was a kid. The only constant thing is that there's no constant thing. That it's always changing. Thank God.
Thank God. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Moira. You're my hero. That was my heroine. You're everything. You're the voice. You're the voice that keeps us breathing. It's such a pleasure to spend this time with you. We miss you a lot.
Such a pleasure. Yeah. Jerry, miss you so much. Miss you so much. And thank you for making this happen. I didn't think 90 minutes was possible, but
I know.
you make it so.
I mean, I milk these for 2 to 3 hours. Sometimes they're part 2s. If you ever want to do a part 2 salon just with vocalists, man, we can, in songwriters. But anyways, you've been really generous and really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jerry. All right. Lots of love. Big love to everyone there.
Bye.